Yo guys, and welcome back for another Blue Protocol Star Residence video. So today I want to talk to you guys about gatekeeping, how to deal with it, why the developers even made a system like ability score, and then also what I want the community to start doing moving forward. So let's jump on into it. I'm adding this section in the editing part towards the end. The video is almost ready to come out, but it's past reset, and we have gotten a lot more score thanks to the reset, being able to craft our own weapons and stuff like that now. So do keep in mind that the numbers aren't going to be exactly probably what you're used to in the current state of the game, but that's not really the point, right? So again, people are just asking for a score that's much higher than is actually needed to complete the content, and in doing so are likely to get people who are artificially inflating their score, and those players are going to perform worse. Ultimately, the biggest problem with inflation right now is that the people asking for the highest gear scores don't really understand what they're asking for. And people asking for 19k, for example, like this person that I found in chat the other day for hard ice dragon when we were doing that at 15k, it just kind of goes to show that they don't really know what they're asking for, because by asking for somebody that's at 19k, they're likely asking for someone who's artificially inflating their score, and thus they will perform worse. Now, there are some classes that do get to benefit more from the way that they have to invest first, but not every class is built that way. I've gone over in previous examples and videos, my class purposely has to invest in the least amount of ability score gain, and that's just to do the most damage, but that's optimal for me and the people playing my class. So you don't want to be asking for an artificial score, because honestly that just makes it look like you don't understand what's going on. It is worth mentioning that over time, what is considered a good ability score will end up going up in time, which is part of the reason why looking at ability score in the beginning is just kind of a bad idea, and why we need to figure out another system. As more weeks go on, any player coming into the game will be able to obtain even more stuff from the reclaim shop, and even players who are playing but not actually doing the content will still be getting some of those rewards. And at some point you can make full 4-piece tier set without ever stepping foot in the raid, and that is a good system for players catching up. We do want catch-up mechanics like that in the game. However, it does kind of make ability score this more ambiguous thing that people aren't really sure about, which is part of what's happening and why people are trying to ask for inflated scores. They don't really know what's happening. They don't know how to figure out like if someone is going to be a good performer or not, and so they're just hoping that the number shoved in their face is going to be high, and then that will result in a good outcome. Okay, so first of all, it's probably best to just kind of explain why a system like ability score even works in the first place. And although it's probably common sense to a lot of you, it might be information that some other people don't know. So we're going to go over it real quick. So in any game like this, ability score exists as a number for you to work towards progression. So naturally working on your ability score over time and doing things like getting those reforged stones and getting stronger, seeing your ability score like that go up, it does add to a level of mastery for the player in the game. It just allows them something that they can chase long term over time, just like any other progression system in any other game. But it's also really important because they use it also as a way for you to get into groups, which is a really big deal, right? It also determines which activities you are eligible for in terms of like queuing for and playing with other players, etc., right? They have ability score everywhere. They have it posted everywhere, and everyone will see your ability score when you do apply to other people's groups as well. The reason for that is because there does need to be a system in place where somebody can look at somebody else and say, okay, you have this much experience relatively in the game, and so I would like to play with you. Or you don't seem to have that much experience with the game, I don't want to play with you. Now, all of this kind of does get messed up by the whole pay to win aspect. So being able to spend real life money and get things like additional skill books, which increase your ability score, etc. Things like that mess with this entire system. But this is just a general idea that pretty much every MMO or every community game has ever really had. There's always some kind of number that players are able to look at someone else and do a comparison for both good or bad reasons. And although that sounds like it might be kind of bad, it is really important, because you do oftentimes want to play with somebody that has a similar investment level as you, and not necessarily financial investment, a time investment, a gameplay investment, right? So you don't really want to play with somebody who's only like 7,000 ability score. You can't bring them to the raid, they're not strong enough, etc. Right? So there are good reasons why numbers like this do need to exist, but in general, I do think it would be much better for the developers to actually go ahead and just give us more of a breakdown of people's actual gear, if that's what they're looking to do, and then maybe even show us things like what we see for mastery score, which is what we'll get into later. If you guys are enjoying the video, leave a like down below, comment down below as well if you have any comments or discussions or anything. I'm always happy to talk to you guys about stuff down there, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Don't forget too, I stream over on Twitch every single day after 8 p.m. Okay, so when it comes to actually dealing with being gatekept, so if you're having issues getting gatekept, no doubt you've probably heard the conventional wisdom from somebody else saying make your own group. There's a reason for that. It actually does work, and it is very true. I myself do that quite often, especially trying to get my alts through content when I'm not playing with anyone else. If you're pugging and you know that you're starting off from a place where you have less, whether it be ability score or mastery score or whatever, it is actually pretty beneficial to make your own groups. And there's a couple of things that you can actually do to make making your own groups go a lot smoother. For example, the first thing I do whenever we enter any of the raids that I make, as the leader before we start, I just let everybody know, like, hey, we're gonna get through this. It's going to take a little time. Please be patient. I will replace people if they're struggling and they're unable to get it, but also be respectful and be mindful to each other that people are going to mess up, right? If you set the tone early and just straight from the beginning, that's a lot better. It sets expectations properly for everyone involved. It also lets them know that you're committed to getting this done and that it's not just going to fall apart. So they're okay putting a little bit more time investment into this. That's what you want. You want people to be patient. You want people to stick around. If you just have a regular group and you don't say anything and there's no communication, if your group wipes, they're gonna leave because there's no communication. There's no reason for them to have more of a time investment in that opportunity instead of going and finding someone else somewhere else. One thing I want to mention too is that actually by setting that tone at the beginning of your raid, I've actually had times where people just straight up added me as a friend afterwards, or they sent me a message immediately saying, hey, thank you so much. That was amazing. I really appreciate it. It felt like it really made me a lot less anxious about trying to do this and get this activity done. And the point being is that if people are willing to do that based off of a single message, it actually isn't too difficult to try and make some friends and join a guild. You know, just be more social. The more friends that you have, the less people you have to pug, the less chances of someone that's a problem getting into your group. All these things kind of stagger together and try and make your experience better, right? The number one way and number one conventional wisdom is to make your own group, but I mean, pretty much the second and third option is to make some friends and join a guild. Hopefully this will all kind of play into that and kind of set the tone, like I said, for the way you play going forward. Now, I don't usually want to advocate for a DPS meter. However, it is really, really beneficial as a raid leader, or at least getting access to that kind of information. At the end of the day, there are going to be times where DPS is an issue, but usually you can have a better idea of when that actually happens. If you start to hit enraged timers, if you're not dying to mechanics, are great examples, right? So you don't need to have access to that information all the time, but if you do find that you're in that situation, you kind of do actually need information like a DPS meter. So hopefully at some point Blue Protocol will provide that information. If you do have access to that kind of information, it's not always about getting rid of the lowest performer. There's lots of meanings on like what the lowest performer could be. Sometimes it literally is just a low DPS value, but DPS isn't everything. Make sure you're looking at overall contribution to how much damage they're doing, and then also taking into consideration their role. If they have a role that is a little bit more involved, or they had a lot of mechanics, or they died early, their performance can be hit pretty significantly. And remember, like I said, people make mistakes. It's pretty unusual that people don't have any mistakes and run flawlessly in activities like this where they're having to repeat them week after week after week, especially when they start to be on farm, right? If it's a brand new raid, it's a little bit different, but something that we've been farming for weeks on end, people tend to not lock in and just kind of phone it in. And that's actually okay. It's not a big deal most of the time. And then lastly, it's really important to kind of make sure that you're doing some amount of moderation in your chat for your group. I had an instance earlier this week where we had somebody who was just constantly complaining, just constantly, like literally every other message in the chat for like a solid 10 minutes was their message. They were telling everyone how to do their job, etc. And honestly, you don't want those people. It's good to have people that are willing to speak up, but it's bad when it crosses a line. So you need to have some kind of threshold. You need to be able to say, okay, at some point that's enough. Or for the example, I did actually say, okay, dude, that's enough. You need to stop. And he did. He performed perfectly well and continued to do well without saying a word after that. And that's 100% the correct way to do it. What you don't want is somebody droning on and on and on. It just creates a bad environment and kind of gets rid of the tone that you set earlier by saying, hey, it's okay. People are going to people are going to die. It's going to be fine. Okay, so lastly, we need to talk about the community needs to come together and fix the problem themselves. Ultimately, I would love if Blue Protocol came in and actually fixed this issue for all of us, but to some extent, gatekeeping isn't actually a game problem or a developer problem. It is a player problem, mostly. Now, you could argue that like them shoving ability score in everyone's face when you apply and stuff like that does make it more likely that people try and, abuse that. But the point being is that gatekeeping is ultimately something that the player base ends up deciding and working through, not the developers. So how are we going to work through this? As a community, we need to stop using ability score. I've already shown in multiple videos that ability score can be inflated. It doesn't really mean very much. And in the context of the game, it's kind of useless at the moment. Maybe at some point it will be a big enough leap in ability score where we will be able to see, significant increases in gear, which should amount to some kind of progression. But I think in general, taking a look at someone's mastery score is just going to be a much better use of everyone's time. Don't bother really looking at gear score or ability score or whatever. Mastery score is going to be the way to go, because right now, at least when doing those M5s, you cannot carry someone through that. That is not possible. I just don't believe it at this point. If you are doing M5s and getting completion on M5s, which means that you have more than 316 score in every dungeon, you're doing well. You probably are in, like, I would say the top like 20%, 30% of gamers. And so realistically, anyone that's even, at that upper threshold who's gone through the motions of getting like 1800 score or higher is going to be a much better player. Now, I've come across multiple people in my lobbies and even applying for hard mode raids that don't even have 300 score. To me, as a player of the game and someone who understands what's going on, that just means that they got all of their level 60 gear from AFK farming bosses, right? We know this because M1s, when you complete them, give you a 100 score value. Now, even if you do mess up a little bit, you can still get the 90s, etc. And if you do that for every single dungeon, there are 6 of them now, you should have roughly around 600 score. If you seriously have less than 300 score, it's a dead giveaway that you're just AFK farming bosses. And that's the truth of it. Now, I've already had people in my previous video talking about, okay, well, that sounds great, but how do I get score if I don't have it already? I can tell you for a fact, I've been grinding mastery score on all 3 of my characters and even now with my new 4th character. But the point being is that mastery score is something that you can get quite easily. People aren't really gatekeeping for going from M1 to M4. And some of the people that are honestly don't really know what they're doing. So you probably don't want to be in their groups anyway. Worst case scenario, you can make your own group and do it. We've been able to do it with people that are pulling, great numbers and people that aren't pulling great numbers. M4 is very, very, very puggable, guys. Very puggable. And you don't have to be very good as long as you relatively understand the mechanics. And sometimes you might have to work through the mechanics with people, but that's just a part of playing the game. It's a part of putting your hours in and getting mastery of the content. You'll learn it better yourself by interacting more with other people and having to teach them as well. And it's just overall going to be a better way for you to grow and get better as a player, which means I also probably will want you in my raids, right? Like that just kind of goes hand in hand, and not me specifically, because I don't necessarily require that high of a mastery score to get into raids. The whole point is that if you have proven, if you've gone through your motions and you've proven that you've done the content in the game that is available, you're going to be a better candidate to go and be grabbed in those raids and not get gatekept. I took somebody to a Mastery 5 Dark Mist Ruin that was only 16,000 ability score. And the reason why is because they had 1950 mastery score. So obviously they've been clearing dungeons and it hasn't been a problem. That's phenomenal. And that's the best use of this system. I don't care what your ability score is. If your ability score isn't that high, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not a good player. Skill does account for things in this, and proper investment, like I've shown in the previous videos. Hopefully this will help you guys deal with some of the gatekeeping, and maybe as a community we'll actually be able to come forward and change the way that everyone actually interacts with ability score and mastery score. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate the support. If you guys liked the video, leave a like down below. Comment if you guys want to talk about anything. I'm always happy to have discussions with you guys down there. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content just like this or other Blue Protocol guide content. And don't forget to come hang out on Twitch, where I stream every single night, probably by the time you're watching this, 8 p.m. PST to roughly 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'll catch you guys later.